Wonderful. Well, everyone, welcome to our weekly Pau Hana here at First Unitarian Church of Honolulu. My name is Reverend TJ Fitzgerald. I'm the minister here. My pronouns are he and him. This is the time each week when we gather, not each week, but most Tuesdays, to talk about things that are important to us, to have some fun, to learn some trivia, all kinds of things. And it's really an honor on the Sundays or the Tuesdays when we can welcome a friend of the congregation or a member of the congregation or someone close to us who's touched our lives already to share some of their experience with us. And this is one of those wonderful Tuesdays. So I'm very happy to have with us Joel Merchant to talk with us about end of life care and end of life talking and end of life concerns. And so, Joel, welcome to Pau Hana. How are you doing tonight?
Thank you all. Very well.
Good.
I hope all of you are good. I want to say hi to Sheila, all the way from Arizona.
Hey.
Arizona, right?
Oh, how come I didn't see that?
She just popped on, Lorraine. It's wonderful to see you, Sheila. How are you? Good.
You're coming to visit soon, right, Sheila?
On Friday.
Yes, I am.
Okay, she'll be here Friday.
Great.
Thank you all. I don't want to take anything away from Joel's presence here tonight. So
You're not. Whatever you have to say is part of the story.
thank you.
Thanks.
Whatever. Pretend this is an open mic session. Whatever you have to say is all part of the story.
Thank you.
As some of you know, because some of you have been in the class at the university that Osher sponsors, officially called Aging and Dying with Dignity, End of Life Issues. Hi, Francine. I've made a change in how I start the first, and I'm not going to do it tonight. I'll just tell you about it. When Richard Alpert became Ram Dass, he started to give lectures all around the world to hundreds of people. And I've got one in particular I like that he named Conscious Aging, Facing Death. And he invites the audience to the talk and explains that he knows that the reason they're all there is to talk about dying. And with a wry smile, he says, as if you're here, as if I know something about it. Yes, thank you, at least. But I think the point is to gather people who find that there's some end of life issue that has occurred in their lives. And as a result, they want to talk about aging and dying. And they typically turn to a partner, a spouse. And it is often the case that the conversation isn't welcome. And they discover one way or another that there's actually a course at the university. A group of people get together and talk about aging and dying. And they move their way into it slowly. They
Learn about it in geriatrics.
They don't know. I want to make sure that was not a question to me. Okay, they don't know each other. The very first session involves each person telling a story about a death in their life. And they do that. They actually do that. And at the end of that time, they discover they have something in common they didn't realize they had in common. It reminds me very much of the year my son was Hawaii State March of Dimes poster child. He was born with spina bifida. And I started the Spina Bifida Association of Hawaii. And the people gathered once a month for a meeting, knowing each other, representing all faiths, creeds, racial and ethnic. And the first thing they discovered is they didn't have to explain to each other what it was like to have a child with handicaps.
Right.
They knew that. They could get on with whatever else was important going on. At the end of that first session, when all the people present have told a story about a death in their life, the others hear it. And while they hear details that are different, what they're also thinking about is their own story. And it's fascinating to watch a group of people come together over an issue like this. It's a pretty intimate issue, aging and dying. So that's what happens. And I do lead courses outside the university. I have facilitated 3 at the Unitarian Church. Lorraine was one of the first people in that first group 10 years ago. I lead groups at 3 different Buddhist temples in town. And TJ invited me to sort of what I considered doing an open mic thing here with you to see the same question I ask people who come to the class at the university. Given everything else it was possible for you to be doing, you showed up here. Why? What's your story?
Because of my grandma.
Because of your grandma?
Yeah.
Because of my grandma.
And what happened with your grandma?
Because
Because you don't want it. Sorry, once more, Ramona.
no. Because
You've always believed in this life, always believed to live fully.
yeah.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
And oh, you knew Richard also. Very little. You mean Ram Dass, your family did? You knew him when you were very little. Oh, really well?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. Thank you, Ramona.
have a video on YouTube with him. I have a video on YouTube.
Oh, you have a video of a teaching with him?
No, a video that I did with him. A video that I did with him.
Oh, a video that you did with him.
Yeah.
Very cool. Wow.
On YouTube.
Yeah.
And you can look for it. You can look for it
We can look for it online?
on YouTube.
On YouTube. Yeah.
I'd like that.
Yeah. Thanks, Ramona.
Thank you, Ramona.
Wow.
No. Yeah. Yeah. That's why I'm here.
That's why you're here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you for that, Ramona.
And I'm sorry I took so much time.
No, there's no time limit on anything today, friends. Thank you. Okay.
So I want to pick on somebody who's been through. May I? Nan, I'm going to pick on you. You were one of the first people who appeared at church in my class at the university. What were you after?
I was I was after Catherine. Catherine said that she had taken this fabulous class from you, and I thought that's something that I want to do, and partly it's because in my inimitable way I had another project which was fundraising for the church and setting up Legacy Foundation, and I wanted to talk with you and have you talk with the congregation because that led me to end-of-life issues, and it seemed like a perfectly Unitarian thing. And one of the things that I'm laughing about now, Joel, is I've spent years and years doing a program called Our Whole Lives, which is sexuality education for children and youth and maybe for adults. But my son recently pointed out to me that doing the work on end-of-life issues is also part of the Our Whole Lives program. So there you go.
Really? We wouldn't know it. We never talk about it. Catherine, what brought you by?
Well, I don't remember, Joel, what brought me to your class, but I'm really aware now, especially looking at all these lovely faces, that we're all getting older and, we're not going to be here, sometime soon. And I'm just, it's like I can't decide if I want to go first or if I want to be left. It's just, it's really spooky. And my son's father is 91 and has just been diagnosed with Parkinson's. And it's his mind that's going, but his body is still really, really strong. So that's a concern, and nobody wants to talk about dying in the family. So that's an interesting situation.
Thank you. Lorraine, you were part of that first group. What do you remember of that group?
What do I remember of the group? That we were all looking for ways to end our lives when it was not a nice way to be living at the very end of your life. We were looking for not an easy out, I wouldn't say that, but making our own decisions rather than having somebody make those decisions for us. And for people who are suffering, we wanted to know what we could do about that. So that was the initial thing. And why I'm here tonight is I want to know any of the latest things that have happened, or if our paperwork is all up to date and all of those things, so that when we choose to go, that it won't make a mess for everybody.
That's quite an idea. Avoiding mess.
Yeah.
I think that the phrase compassionate choices, which is the title of the probably one of the dominant organizations in the country dealing with end-of-life issues, is important because it reminds us that when it comes to end of life and the issues surrounding end of life, people have choices. And I think we don't talk about it often enough so that we come to understand even what choices might be available. What do you think, Sheila? You and I have been in a situation where we've talked to somebody together who soon after that ended a life. I appreciate that we had that chance to do that. Do you have a comment about this issue and what we're sort of going around about?
You know, it was surprising because I was a part of the lay ministry team at the church at that time, and Lorraine was also a part of that group. And it was through Mickey Selwyn that I was encouraged to join the lay ministry team. She was relentless in pursuing me to do that, so I did. And then shortly thereafter, she took the VSED way, I think, voluntarily stop eating and drinking, and stopped her medications and whatnot. And, there were a lot of other things that were going on. But I kind of felt like she was trying to imbue in me something, and I wasn't really sure what, and I never really had a chance to talk to her about it fully, which was kind of sad, but that's the way it was. And I think right now also, because I am looking at some health issues with my husband, and my sister's having cancers, and there's just a lot of impending doom hanging around, I think. And I wanted to get kind of clear on it. And so I thought back on that time that we worked with that lovely person from our church. And he was having a hard time because he tried multiple times to actually take his life, but he finally was successful shortly after you and I went and talked with him. And, he really wanted to do it. And I think that he felt good that we were there to at least have maybe bore witness to his effort. So anyway, that's all I have to say. I'm glad to be here tonight. Thank you.
It's good to have you here. Thank you for joining us. Francine, are you still here? Do you have a story? Because you've been part of a group.
I'm here. There I am.
Hi.
Hi. So I think that I just had a general interest in knowing what options were available when one does get to a point in life where, it's just would feel better not to be around. And I wanted to know what those options were. I know that I knew that, well, we had just recently moved here, and I knew that there was a law that allowed one to take one's own life by, I'm not wording this properly, I know that, but that there was a way to have a death that you chose. And I think that I wouldn't necessarily want to be around. I felt like I've seen people suffer a lot, and I wouldn't want to go through that, and I wouldn't want anyone I love to go through that. So that's why I took your course, Joel.
And I'm glad that you participated in that.
Thank you.
One of the people who's currently in the course that I'm the fall semester at the university is Nancy. And I'd like to ask Nancy, who's not surprised that I called on her, because once a week I nail everybody. Nancy, your turn. What brought you to the course? You're muted.
Many of the reasons that Francine said brought me to it. Also experiencing the death of my parents and comparing that with people who go to doctors made me want to think about it more thoroughly. That's why.
Say more about people going to doctors.
Well, most of us go to doctors for care, and I don't particularly trust doctors to help me die if I need to. So I wanted to find out how to do it. And after experiencing my parents' deaths from illness, but in some ways it was faster and more and easier for my parents than for people who do go to doctors. So I was just comparing and figuring out what I would want in my future.
What was the morning helpful? I guess, was this morning's meeting?
Yes, it was very helpful. It was very specific. And
how would you describe who he is and what he does?
Okay, well, this is the doc. He's a retired doctor who is head of compassion and choice for Kaiser. And he helps people decide what they want to do and helps find them ways to end their life if it's necessary. And so he knew all where to go and how things are in Hawaii and where to look on the computer for answers. So I felt that he was really an excellent person to speak to us.
I'm glad. I'm glad.
I took a whole page of notes.
Carol, what did you have in mind when you showed up tonight, knowing that we were going to talk about dying?
Well, I normally come on Tuesday nights, no matter what it is that the conversation is about. However, I like to call it 3/4 of a century. And my husband—
That's a nice phrase. Thank you.
3/4 of a century plus 10. So I just want to hear what's available, what information is available for us to have conversation about what it is that he wants, what it is that I want, or we haven't really talked about that. And so I'm open for information and no particular end result one way or another, just open to hearing what's available.
Good. Just so that you don't think it's a mystery, let me summarize what Nancy has told you about this morning's class. The university class, Chuck Miller is a retired oncologist and came back when the state passed Our Care, Our Choice Act, effective January 2019, which said that we have the legal right to ask for medical aid in dying. He's the first person that Kaiser sends out to talk with people who express interest in medical aid in dying. I was delightfully surprised that he signed up for the course in the fall of 2020. And he has since then been an active guest speaker for my other classes. That's why he came by. He was earlier the head of the Medical Advisory Committee for Compassion and Choices for the state of Hawaii, and has been active in medical aid in dying for, I'd say, about 15 years. We first introduced the bill into the legislature 20 years ago, and it took 20 years of lobbying and a great boost from John Radcliffe, who became sort of the poster boy for medical aid in dying. We passed the bill in 2018 with an effective date of January 2019. So in summary, we are one of 12 or 13 or 14 jurisdictions in the United States that legalize medical aid in dying. That's the background to what Nancy commented about this morning. Jill and Mike raising hands. Go.
Right. I did read an article about the bill and its after effects fairly recently, in the last month or two, probably in the newspaper. And it noted that very few people to date, since it became effective now almost 2 years ago, had utilized it. And I think the number actually was 3. And the reason that they seemed to think this was the case was that various stipulations in the bill about timelines and consultation with experts were so stringent that many people who wanted to do it ended up dying before they were able to complete the process to get permission to die with dignity, as they say. So I wonder if you can tell us anything about that.
I can go on at length about that, but I'm not going to. But I can tell you that Kaiser has about 60 patients a year who express interest in medical aid in dying, and that about 110 Kaiser members so far in the 2 years the law has been in effect have taken advantage of it or have at least talked about it. The second point, so that takes care of the number 3. It's higher than that. The second point is about 1/3 of the people who ask for and receive the medication do not use it. They die first. The third point I'll address is people often say, oh, what a lot of humbug. There's so much to do. Not really. It does require it's probably easier if one is a Kaiser member than a member of another medical group, because Kaiser had a year in California after California legalized medical aid in dying in 2018. Kaiser had a year to get its act together, and its 19 medical districts in California. And when it became effective here, they sort of handed us the book here. This is how we're doing it. So Kaiser has in effect become the gold standard for medical aid in dying in Hawaii. And they have Chuck Miller, a retired oncologist who came back to work, and two what they call navigators to help people navigate through the details of the law. I'm going to turn to TJ and just say, because it's written in legalese, it looks complicated. When I distribute the law itself to members of the class, they go, oh, just because it's right, a 56-page law. And in it, they help you through, here's the simple part. An oral request, which can be by phone, an initial written request, a doctor who agrees that you're terminally ill, probably not more than 6 months to live, and it's the basis for a prognosis, a second doctor who agrees with the first. We are the only state to add, we are the only jurisdiction to add a third medical professional to the game, and that is a clinical psychologist interviews you to see if you can tell what, right from wrong, up from down, see that you're not suffering from depression, see that you're not feeling enforced to do this against your will. And those are the three medical professionals who sign off on it. That is followed by a second written request, which is just a piece of signature on the paper. One of the two, either the consulting or the attending physician writes the prescription, which you pick up at the drugstore, and bring it home and squirrel it away. And a third of the people don't use the prescription. That's purposely simplifying a 56-page law. Did that help, Mike?
Yeah, I was just wondering that it did talk about the medical professionals, and you've covered that very thoroughly. Thank you. But it also implied that there were mandatory waiting periods.
There is. We have the longest waiting period, which is 20 days. The waiting period refers to the time between the first request and the second request. And as Chuck Miller said this morning, if you wait too long, you will probably, it is likely you'll die of the disease. I'm gonna get to you, David, to ask a question about this. You'll probably die of the disease rather than take the medication because of the 20-day waiting period. There are 4 amendments that we put forth to the legislature this last year. The Senate passed them handily. It went to the House. The House assigned the possible amendments to 4 committees with only 2 weeks left in the legislative session. Can't do that. That meant it's not going to pass this year. Those amendments include one of the doctors being able to waive the waiting period so that a person near death can take advantage of medical aid in dying. Another amendment is to allow nurse practitioners to write the prescription themselves. It doesn't have to be a medical doctor. Third is There's a third and fourth there, and I'll provide that information later. I'm not sure what my question to David is, but it had to do with the waiting period being longer than the person might have left between the first request and taking the medication. Did you have anything to say about the waiting period or the law?
Are you asking me, Mike?
Yeah, I thought I'd pick on you.
Well, it
Just-
sounds quite reasonable to me. I think the amendments sound reasonable also. Maybe the waiting period initially was overly cautious. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have much more to say.
Okay. Mike, pardon me. New Mexico is the newest jurisdiction to pass medical aid in dying. It was just a couple of weeks ago. I think their waiting period is much less than ours, and I think they're able to waive it. So it's progressing, but it's progressing slowly. You had your hand up again.
Yes, I did. We've all probably read over the last several years somewhat of a crisis they've had on death row, because the sole company in the world, which I believe is in Germany, that was manufacturing the drugs that they used to use for the fatal injection, had stopped making them simply because there wasn't enough demand anymore, since so many countries had banned executions. And the US, in the places where they were still doing that, notably Texas, began to try other combinations of drugs. And they had all kinds of problems. People who clearly suffered an enormous amount of pain when it was supposed to be painless, and so on and so forth. And there were issues about constitutional rights, cruel and unusual punishment, and so on. In that context, I'm curious, the drug that actually is prescribed here, how effective is it? And if in fact is that effective, then why did they have such a problem with these death row drugs in terms of finding something that was both effective and painless?
Hang on, I've got to find you. Oh, there you are. You jumped to the left of my screen. Not using the right drugs. How effective is the drug? There are 4 drugs, actually 5. If a person comes to an end of life decision and decides to hasten a known death, they start an hour ahead of time with anti-nausea medication, because otherwise they will throw up the drugs. An hour later, they take 4 drugs in powder form with about 6 to 8 ounces of fluid, which they drink in about 3 to 5 minutes. So far, the estimate is, the experience is that they will lose consciousness between 5 and 15 minutes after drinking the juice, and their heart will stop and their breathing will stop between, this is the experience so far in Hawaii, between 2 hours, and the longest has been 6 hours. It's 100% effective once you drink the juice. There's no pain to it. The person loses consciousness and goes into a deep coma and dies on average 3 to 4 hours later. I hope that answers that question. Somebody asked that this morning too. It was a good one, and it had to do with using drugs on death row. Lorraine, you had your hand waved.
Yeah, I did. So suppose you can't swallow.
Ah, yes. You can use, if you have a stomach tube, you can use that. If you have anything like a rectal tube for an enema, you can use that. What you have to do is be able to do it yourself. And that's the catch. In all these jurisdictions in the United States, you have to be able to do it yourself. Now, part of my frustration personally is that we live just south of a very civilized country, which, when it passed medical aid in dying, it began with a unanimous Supreme Court decision. Can you imagine our Supreme Court being taking a unanimous judgment on anything? But no, Canada did that, and they said, okay, it's up to the provinces, and the provinces carried it out a year later. And Canada's law, I like because of two things in particular. One, it doesn't have to be a foreseeable death. It doesn't have to be within 6 months. You can see that death is coming, but it doesn't have to be like ours within a 6 months period of time. And the second thing I like about Canada is it solves the problem of people not being able to do it themselves because they allow injections. They allow doctors and nurse practitioners to give the person an injection. So the third thing is that if you're worried or from a family that has suffered dementia and it's starting for you, you can actually sign a contract in Canada that says on such and such a date, that will be the date I choose to die. And if between now and then I become incapacitated, unable to make a decision, I am now making this decision. I'm signing a piece of paper and somebody will show up that day and help me end my life. That's all possible in Canada. Unfortunately, you have to be a Canadian citizen. In all the jurisdictions in the United States, you have to be a citizen of that jurisdiction. We're not going to see a mad dash for end-of-life tourism to Hawaii. It won't happen. The only place that allows non-citizens to come to end their life is Switzerland. And they don't experience a mad dash of people coming there either. So those are the controls. And the controls all come from a religious base. Massachusetts tried to pass medical aid in dying years ago in the 2008 general election. Francine, I'll get to you after I finish, and then Catherine. Massachusetts made that public that it was going to be on the ballot. Plane loads left Salt Lake City for Boston and went door to door and started slippery slope stuff. Yeah, Lorraine, cover it. Right. The Roman Catholic Church went crazy. Those are the two main, and evangelicals. Yeah, both my brothers. My mother and father who born me into the Unitarian Church in Rhode Island once asked me, why do you think your brothers have become, one is Mormon, one is local? Why do you think they did that? I said, because they're looking for family. That's another story. It's a religious base that you can see oppose medical aid in dying. The clue that this is an opposition is their use of doctor-assisted suicide. Every law that's passed in the 14 jurisdictions specifically says the underlying cause of death is not suicide. It's the underlying medical condition. People are not committing suicide. Chuck Miller wrote in 2012, I'll make a copy available for those of you who want it. Medical aid in dying is not suicide. That's been a big thing. And that's part of what that's part of the whole mix. Francine, and then who else had Catherine? Francine.
I was wondering if Chuck Miller does assisted death for people that are not Kaiser members?
Yes,
He does.
that's the short answer.
Okay, well, that's all I needed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Be aware that be aware that his insurance covers him against problems with Kaiser members only, not with non-Kaiser members. That's the hesitation.
I see.
He
But you would,
but he
I'm
does
sorry.
work with people who are non-Kaiser.
Okay, but you would, do you know of other doctors on the island that do assist with death?
Yes,
Okay,
and you and I can have a separate conversation about that.
okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Catherine had your hand up.
That was my question too. Is there a list of doctors, if you're not a Kaiser member, who would assist? And you answered that, so thank you.
Okay. There's no available list. It's word of mouth.
Okay,
Okay. You happen to know me, who happens to know Chuck, who happens to know Pablo Stewart, who's a psychiatrist in the medical school faculty, who assists in medical aid in dying, and the two of them know 4 other people, and the head of neurology at Kaiser will write a prescription, and he knows somebody else. It's word of mouth.
okay,
And
thank you.
Compassionate Choices is doing, I think their main focus is called a program called Doc to Doc, DOC to DOC, Doc to Doc. And it's having doctors contact doctors and say, listen, pay attention to this. This is real. It helps people. It's slow. We want nurse practitioners to be able to sign prescriptions because on the neighbor islands, the availability of doctors in rural Big Island, very difficult. On rural Kauai and Maui, it's not an easy thing to find a doctor. I'm working with 2 people on Maui who are desperate for finding a doctor. Oh, thank you. That's another amendment. If you go to a doctor and you say, what's your position on medical aid in dying? And he said, forget it. We want that person to be responsible to refer us to somebody she knows who will participate in medical aid in dying. We don't have that written into the law yet.
Were you cheering, Ramona, or did you have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like seems only fair of medical practitioners, doesn't it? Yeah.
I hope that I'll be able to
You'll hope you'll be able to do it when your time comes.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us feel that way. Thanks, Ramona. Esther, I see Esther's hand is up. I just wanted to.
Esther, hi.
Well, I've been hearing a lot of practical questions, at least to my mind, they're practical. People who know they want to be able to take their own life in a painless way, I guess I would say. I have a completely different issue with death. I'm just really uncomfortable with the whole idea of dying. So I'm way behind everybody else. I'm not ready to be dying yet. I know I will, but I am totally uncomfortable with the idea. And I was kind of hoping that there'd be an opportunity for me to somehow or other get more comfortable with what inevitably will happen to me.
You've come to the right place. It starts with a conversation about where you are now.
I agree with you because
You agree with her because you feel the same way?
I just haven't heard anything on that subject at all so far tonight.
I agree with what you know, fully,
Even though you're 34?
no, even though
Even though you're totally for it?
yeah.
It's still scary. Yeah. Joel, any thoughts?
Yes.
I would like to say something to Esther. Can we do that?
Esther, is that all right with you?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Go ahead, Lorraine.
I think some of us are coming to this from having observed a bad death. And by that, I mean where a person was suffering and couldn't have any relief from that, couldn't, just with that as a background, we're looking at these other alternatives as helping those that we know and love and ourselves as well, not to have to go through a process that we have observed that was very unkind. So it's coming to it backwards.
Yeah, I can understand that completely. I mean, when thinking about what might I say about what I want, the one thing that I know is that if I'm in unremitting pain and it can't be relieved, I would rather die than continue if that's all I have, if I know that it's not going to go away. Or maybe even if it's bad enough, even if it would going to be going away, I might still want the option to escape from really bad pain. But that's the only thing I know. Other than that, I'm just totally uncomfortable with the idea of dying. And even with that, I'm uncomfortable with the idea of dying. And I just haven't heard us say anything that helps me find a way to look at this that doesn't just give me all kinds of emotional pain, just considering the idea at all. And since people never talk about death, I don't have a chance to work through it or get helpful ideas or anything else. So I was hoping that this would be an opportunity to somehow or other find ideas that will allow me to feel more comfortable on the subject. I see David and Joko's hand up.
Are you saying, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ramona.
Why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? Why are you afraid?
What is it? I'm sorry.
Why are you afraid?
Oh, why are you afraid? Thank you.
The unknown, I guess. My father always used to say, when you die, and that's the end of things, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. But nevertheless, I'm uncomfortable with the notion. I don't even know that much, Ramona. I don't even know the answer to your question.
Oh, okay. Why I feel because I'm afraid of missing people.
You're afraid of missing people?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's 3 hands up and we have 4 minutes left. So I wanted to make sure we get to folks here. So
David Junko, then Kathy Gillum, then Nancy.
I'll try to be quick. In response to Esther's, my dad lived just fully. He lived every day, fully, all his life. But he had what is it called, the medical directives and everything all taken care of about the time of his death. But he lived his life fully. And then one day he got immensely sick, went to the hospital, and his body was a mess. And he had his medical directives, and he talked to the doctors, and the doctors were incredibly helpful. Dave and I and my brother wanted to keep him alive. I mean, that's what happens to the loved ones. We did everything we could. How come you're not doing this? How come you're not doing? We were just crazy out of our mind, even though I agree with everything you're saying, Joel, you know. But at the time, we were out of our mind trying to keep my dad alive. And he just said, you know, I don't want any of that stuff. Just give me some morphine. It hurts, so give me some morphine. And then he said, you know, I'm going to be out of the hospital by Sunday. And we all said, fine, we're not going to send you any place. We'll take care of you at your apartment, blah, blah, blah. And on Sunday, he died, just like that. And I find that to be just beautiful, and that he lived to the last moment. He knew the end has come, and he didn't want any care, and he died. And in a funny way, we felt okay about it. So even though we're in Buddhist teaching, you know, there are two things we know: you're born and then you die. But while you're alive until you die, like your dad said. So that's what it is. But I do need to think about it a little bit more emotionally. Thank you, Joel.
My pleasure. Kathy, we haven't heard from you.
Thank you. My wife of 30 years went through the Death with Dignity process in 2014. And she was always a complete take control person. And it was important to her to die with the same dignity that she had lived with. And I think she was very concerned and worried about the process up until a couple of days before the date that she had signed up for. And at that point, there was an acceptance. And I think the uneasiness that we all feel is really maybe our lack of acceptance that this is our process too. But my daughter, who lived until she was almost 41, went through the same process, and she did not take the medication right at the end. She accepted her coming death in such a beautiful spiritual way. So I think we all have our own ways of coming to acceptance. And that's when things smooth out. Thanks.
Thank you. Nancy Young.
No, actually, it's Mike. I think you all may be a little bit surprised to hear that in my 51 years as a Unitarian Universalist minister, the list of people that I have either been present and kicked the plugs out of the wall, or been there when the person used or was getting ready to use the handful of drugs that the doctor had given them, with the instruction that here's 15 pills, never take more than 5 at a time. This has been going on for a great many years, and we are finally getting civilized and sane about it. Incidentally, my Buddhist Zen master, when asked what happens after you die, he said, you begin to stink.
I will tell Roshi that. Thank you. You had an ending.
An ending? Oh, I didn't have a ending planned.
Okay.
Other than
because you
it's
said
Well, no, other than I have things to do after this. No, I mean, I'm just saying that 7 o'clock is when we end. Yeah.
Will you keep the Zoom on, or shall we switch to mine?
Goes away.
So I can stop the recording. If I switch it over, then I don't think the recording continues. So I don't think that really is a problem. So I'll end that.